Well, I'm here with Andrew Wilson. We're talking about preaching, and we've looked at what preaching is and what we're trying to achieve when we are preaching on Sundays. We've talked about how to communicate well, and now in this last conversation, we're going to talk more about how the nuts and bolts of actually preparing a message. Because if people's experience of preaching is like mine, I love the actual preaching, but the bit before, when you're trying to actually think about what to say, is terrifying, and each week feels like it's the first time. Like, I've done this before, but I can't think what to say. So how do you approach your text, approach preparing a message, trying to bring some level of structure, trying to even internalize it, all of that? Where do you want to start with it?
So I think a place to start might be where we finished the previous one, which is on this gift versus skills thing. Because when I talk about how I do it, it wouldn't work for everyone. Because I think gifts are different, and I think I'm pretty good at on the fly structuring thoughts and unbundling problems. I find that it's quite intuitive. So I don't very often have to work hard at what a lot of people find really hard, which is structure. So I generally find if somebody shows me their notes, they've got a jumble of ideas. I'm normally, within a minute or two of talking to them, able to give them a structure that's better than what they came up with after hours of trying. If they're new preachers, not experienced. Are you laughing because I've done that with you, right? Exactly. But so that in a way, what I work at isn't that. What I have to work at is like the modern word would be relatable, like relatable, or being winsome, or being accessible. I find that for me the struggle is how am I going to make people feel warm, and how am I going to feel like people know me, and being the right level of vulnerability. Those sort of more soft skills, which I'm not as much of a people person as I'm good with the ideas and so on. So with that said, I think it's just important to get you, and everyone will have some things on that they're strong at and some they're weak at. So some people say, no, I'm good at structure and I'm great at being relatable. I just don't like reading. Or I don't find the new ideas so I'm often going, I just don't have very many fresh, interesting things to say. And so John Wesley has this lovely quote where he just lambasts this preacher who he thinks, preaching's so boring, and no wonder it is because you don't read enough books, which is Wesley's way of saying, actually, if you want to keep getting new ideas, you got to keep reading, because that's what sparks and stimulates knowledge, and you might not enjoy that. Whereas I love reading. Getting the new ideas is never the problem, like you. It's just, how do I find an outlet to give people all these ideas or winnow them? So I think a place to start is really with your own limitations, and go, what aspects of preparing a sermon am I good at? What am I bad at? The one that people often struggle with happens to be one that I find quite easy, which is collecting and organizing your thoughts into a structure. Having said that, I do find it has helped me to use a pretty similar structural shape to almost all my sermons, which I'll build on what we did in the previous conversation with the shape of the whole thing. And so I would generally do, I'd actually do mine on PowerPoint. Almost no one is ever convinced by this idea, but I was a management consultant before I did this, and I just used their document structure and did the same thing. And so I have, where I will, Barack Obama apparently used to wear the same suit every day because he said, I had so many decisions to make in a day. I didn't want to have to make an additional decision about what suit I was going to wear. And I find that there's so much I'm going to have to do in sermon prep that I want the shape of it to be roughly the same. And let's say I've got 5. Sometimes I do it with 6 different pages. But the rule I do with PowerPoint is that in each page you have to have something written at the top of the page that tells you what that page is, which also really helps your communications team if you use visuals and slides, because then they can see what the main point of that heading is as well. And so what I will usually do is there will be an introduction page, there will be a Bible page, and then there'll be points 1, 2, and 3, and depending on how long the message is, each one of these takes 5 minutes, I find. I've learned how to do that. And if there is a 30-minute sermon, I might have a 6th page, which is more of a landing, conclusion, application, leading into communion, prayer, whatever. But now since COVID, we do 25 minutes. We lost 5. I don't know where that went. The service is the same length, but somehow I've had 5 minutes lost. But I think that's all good. And so this shape helps me, because what I find is I can start writing this page without needing a huge... I actually the first 2 pages are often done without me necessarily having to do too much work on how I'm going to structure everything. And for some people, psychologically, that can help them because they feel like I've got a bit of momentum. And sometimes here, I'm really I know what my primary thing I'm going to try and get people to see is, And so I'm probably going to say, I'm situating the message in time in the story of the church, and then I'm situating the message within the culture and the questions the culture might have. So although on the previous slide I said, you read your Bible and then here's the problem, the way I tend to do it actually is that I will give them the problem before I read the passage, often.
So because their attention's with you. So
yes,
you show them why
exactly.
they stay listening.
Yes. And often people, particularly the church, will listen to the Bible because they know it's the Bible and they should, and they want to. So I don't necessarily need to put that up front. Or lots of churches that will be read previously in their liturgy, so that may not apply, but in my setting it does. So I'm trying to locate it for the church, as if to say, we're in this series, or we've just started something on this, or you may remember over the last few weeks we've been looking at Jesus' view of whatever. But I also want to locate it in the culture, as in, this is where this passage or this theme or this topic collides with contemporary reality. Now, it's not formulaic. I think if it's too formulaic, everyone in the church, I know you say the same formula of words every day. But broadly speaking, that's what page one's trying to do. And I can often do that sometimes do that without knowing what this page is going to say. So I'm not someone who goes, the whole thing's drafted before, and then I write it out longhand. And I use bullet points all the time. I just find them easy to use. And so that opening page, hi, welcome, this is where we are as a church. Here's an issue I want you to think about. Here's a question, here's a provocation, here's a challenge. Then the Bible, that's obviously just copy-paste from Bible Gateway. So I've actually got, I know I haven't, but it looks like I've got 2/5 of it done already. But I find psychologically that makes me feel like I'm underway without staring at the blank sheet. Now you might say, well, it just defers the blank sheet because now this page is blank. But even having got 2/5 of the way through feels psychologically like you've done more. And for those who really struggle with writer's block, I have other tricks as well, which is sometimes it can help to describe what your preacher's about on an email to yourself or a friend or whatever, because the very act of writing in a different format sometimes tricks your brain into thinking, oh, it's just Monday, I can just write this. You don't have blankness. You go, I'll just write an email to you and say, hey, Jez, I'm planning on doing a message on 1 Kings 14, and it's kind of about this, and I want to do this, but I don't really know how to structure it, but I kind of want to say this. I want to, there's a bit in there. Even the practice of doing that, you might find phrases, things come out, which you can then use here. And then you go.
Dynamic that I find, I can, if someone comes to me with some sermon notes and they're trying to build a sermon, I can find structure and tell them what they're saying a lot easier than I can do it with my own.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know. I'm not sure all people find that. I think external processors find it. I think people who naturally formulate their thoughts out loud and in written form, which you and I both very, very like hyper like this, which is why this conversation is full of interruptions and gaps and changes of subject, because we're both like that. Whereas I think more introverted, reflective, thoughtful people who think about what they're going to say before they say it, I just don't understand those guys. But anyway, there's a lot of them around. I've worked with plenty. They will often want to get the idea more fully formed and then state it. So you and I probably find that kind of ad-libby version suits our personalities better than the disappear into a study and think.
And I kind of mentioned that because I think it's useful, again, just for preachers out there to be comfortable in their own skin and realise we're made differently. We'll approach all this differently, even the way you've said this is how I do it, but nobody else will do it. That's releasing. It doesn't mean you haven't got the gift. It doesn't mean you need to be a bad preacher. And I think sometimes we hold ourselves up against, and particularly in our day and age, these YouTube sensations or internet preachers, amazing world-class communicators, and the average guy in a church congregation in a rural setting is very, he just pastoring people, loving people, and yet we just need to empower them, encourage them. Me, I'm one of them.
Yeah. Well, we all are. Yeah.
So my next question is: so you've got intro, and then Bible reading, and then we're on to this blank page number 1.
Yeah.
So you've talked about I might email myself, but what do you do to start generating some of the ideas?
So, effectively, I've started that process before I start writing, because I've been thinking about the message and I know what the passage is. I know the passage is coming. Again, this wouldn't work if you preach 45 Sundays a year, which many of our American brothers do. That's not. I've never done that. So I preach 20 times a year. So I've always got a bit of time to think ahead. But I'd be going for a walk. That's where the sermons begin. I'm out walking. I walk by the sea, whatever. And ideas are just coming, and I'm thinking it'd be quite good to be able to pick up on this. When was the last time I preached on prayer? Okay, I'm going to preach. That's my next message. But we did it. Okay, did it that way last time. I don't want it to be the same. I think it'd be really good to take this sort of angle on prayer. And there's a sort of the main point, in some ways, point number 3 in that system comes before points 1 and 2, at least in that I want to get people there. I think that's the key thing. If I had to turn this into one sentence, which I have to because my comms team demanded everybody, can you give us a one-sentence summary of your message for the podcast, all that. So but that's a good discipline because it makes you go, I got to know exactly what this message is about before I start. So I do that. And so often number 3 might be where I don't write it yet, but I know where I've got to get to. And then really it's a question of I've got the text is saying this, and I think that the main thing in the text that we're trying to get out of it to help people see and be drawn to Christ in wonder is this. Now, what are the intermediate steps that might help the people get there, which are both true to the text and connect with the problems raised in the culture that we talked about? And obviously that will vary a lot by message, but usually the opening, the beginning of the third page, or point 1, is actually to pick up on the problem that are raised on the very first page. Because, so you say, here's what we're going to be doing today, and this is why it's going to, and here's the issue it resolves. Read the scripture and say, so can you see that that passage, you notice that bit there, or this idea came in there, so I want to look at that and understand why that's true. And then I will often introduce my 3 points. I do this like Keller does, actually, because I learned it from him. I thought it was a really good way of doing it. And I don't do it, again, formulaically, but he would often say, and so today we're going to learn what the problem is, why it doesn't work, and why Jesus is the answer. What the problem is, why does he just repeats these 3. Now, I don't always do it just like that, but I do find it's helpful because it signposts to the church who are used to it, this is where we're going. And it helps me just lay out what we're going to do. And then the second half of page 1 and all of page 2 are then making the first 2 of those 3 ideas. And I would say this, I was told this by someone online, I can't remember who, don't make points. As in, don't simply say, number 1, and then a sentence, number 2, and then a sentence. Instead, try and group those 3 things together as of the same sort. So, 3 reasons why X, or 3 things you should do to Y, or 3 ways God has done Z, rather than point 1, we should all be doing this. Point 2, Jesus is the something. Point 3, something, as if they're out of step with each other. It's always better to group them if you can. Just makes the sentence less forgettable, but also helps you be a bit more disciplined and focused in what you're saying.
That's helpful. And so you talked about the kind of early preparation process. Do you still brainstorm your ideas and just trying to chuck everything onto a page first of all?
When I get stuck, I do. Okay. That's not normally how I begin. I think...
Obviously, the brain doesn't naturally think in sequence. It kind of just throws out like little sparks.
Yeah, and this is why I say the thing about gift, because I think mine does a bit.
Okay.
Or maybe
ADHD doesn't.
No, I don't think it naturally, but it does. I don't have to work very, and that's why I'm saying I might not be the best person to ask that question, because I do generally find that things flow fairly well for me like that. And I also think, by the way, this is where I don't think the idea that you as a preacher, for it to be all your own work, you have to go into a study and you have to do it all yourself and then come out with a fully finished product which you have shared with nobody. I just don't think you see that anywhere in the Bible. And I think that there might be times where that's, in fact, entire ministries where that's thoroughly inappropriate to your gift. Because you might say, I work much better externally anyway, so sharing ideas with someone. I used to, our friend Steve Baber, who I would always go and just knock on his door, interrupt him, and then just chat to him about what I was preaching, because it would help me shape the message. And I think if you're not someone who naturally structures things, having a conversation with a friend who is better at it than you, or who just naturally is quite good at disentangling problems, could be a really good thing to do. Just, I only need 5 minutes of your time, but I'm just preaching about this. Any thoughts like, well, you could do it this way. And there's a collaboration drawing on one another's gifts, just like I do when I say, I really need a story about, or is there anything in music which would help me, contemporary music, which would help me make that point, any lyrics that tell this story? I just don't listen to enough to know, but I've got people on our team who do, and then they would help me, or in our church, I do a lot on the issue of race. I just have a very limited perspective because of my background, so can you help? We do that all the time, so I just think structure might be one of those things, where if that's something you really struggle with, just finding someone you know who's better at it than you and chatting to them about it. So if that is a real blockage, call for help.
Yeah, that's helpful. So, for that to happen, you often need to be a little bit more prepared than up against the wire. And,
yeah.
I've got to do this, got to do this. So what's your typical kind of run-in to a preach? Do you have by Wednesday?
So I have to film on a Tuesday for the following Sunday. Okay. So I don't the option of of leaving it till the last minute isn't with me anyway. And I'm really glad. That works for me. Some people like the stress of the late, I was talking to a friend recently. He said, I prepare on Saturdays. I'm like, I just cannot fathom how that is. But if it works for you, okay. But I'm not judging, but I kind of am. So for me, preparing either the week before or on the Monday works really well. And so that tends to be what I do. But again, this is a sort of of all people, Rob Bell, who when he did a message on communication, obviously we've since gone different ways, but it really helped me, I think, by, as he was telling an audience, like the two ways to prepare are, you get to the few days before, and then you go, right, I now need something that can illustrate this, 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 and this. And the other way is that you spend your entire life walking around, clocking something and going, that's going to work as an illustration. The next time I preach on this, and you're reading. I did it. I read Augustine a few years back and thought, next time I preach on prayer, I'm going to use his letter to Proba as a way of teaching people how to pray through the Lord's Prayer. And then you don't touch it for years. But then when you get to the next, oh, right, now there's a message on prayer, that's a good way of you doing it, or whatever it is. And so I think you have to be quite proactive, for, as you say, for this kind of model to work. If you leave it to the last minute, there are very few friends who are going to take your call. If you're ringing them up on, during the middle of the football on Saturday afternoon going, I don't have a structure. You're like, okay, you made your bed, you lie in it. But so I do think that thinking ahead a bit more than that would probably help most.
And I think it's sometimes, part of where gift comes in, isn't it? There's a difference between doing a sermon and being a preacher, in the sense that I know that I obsess, I think about preaching all the time. And I was often, in the early days as a Christian, thinking, I hope I get the chance to preach one day, because I'm obsessing about it all the time.
Yeah.
But what that has meant is that my life is, I read because I want to find things that are going to help people. Like you said, I'm jotting down things that might be good for communicating. And that's just a way of serving, is recognizing, oh, this is because the Lord's wired you like this.
Yeah.
You're obsessive
Yes.
about this aspect of ministry,
Yeah.
Which is really valuable. Anything else for people then on how to prepare sermons?
No, I just think at the very end, you want it to be as clear as possible what it is you are saying, and just the shorter those lines at the top of the page can be, the crisper they can be, the clearer you can be about exactly what you are saying, the better. Because if you're not quite sure what you're saying, the people listening to you definitely won't be. And that's particularly true when it comes to application and when it comes to explaining anything that isn't initially complex. So working hard at just even writing down. The longer I've gone on, the more I've written down of what I'm going to say. So when I started, I just had more open bullet points, but I kept getting in trouble by saying silly things, and eventually realized I need to write more. The longer I've gone on, it's given me more, so the clarity is increased, and I say far fewer things that I wasn't already planning to say now, and that's helped me be clearer, because I then have to work at even that phrase. Is that the best way of saying it, or could you say it better than that? And I think that sort of iterative process of going round and round again and going, is that the right way of doing it? And as time goes on, you get quicker.
Do you write longhand sentences?
A lot of the time. They're in bullet point form, but yes. Yes, if you looked at my notes from my most recent message, most of the things I say out loud are written word for word on the page, or very nearly. Stories are different, visual illustrations are different, because you deliberately don't do those in a stylized way, but most of the sermon is
There seems to
written.
be a move in communication styles towards a noteless approach that's a lot more engaging with the people. Do you do that? Do you encourage that, or do you actually discourage that because you think, no, you need to be careful?
I don't discourage it or encourage it. I think if people watch me preach, they feel like I'm talking to them the vast majority of the time, and that's I have to do, because I'm on camera a lot. So you're just doing it straight. I don't think most people think, oh, you never lift your head from your notes. They wouldn't say that. In fact, some people say, I don't notice that you particularly use notes, because I can glance quickly and see it and go. And obviously that comes with practice too. So no, I don't discourage it. I personally am I'm impromptu. I find speaking comes, I would often, again, you know me well enough to know, I will often say things that I then think, oh gosh, was that the wisest thing, and get an elbow from Rachel. And I'm just like that as a person. So for me, guarding my heart against saying stupid things, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks, I have to watch that. Whereas I think for somebody who is perhaps more bookish in temperament, might need to actually have fewer notes on the page in order that they make more eye contact with people. But I don't think most people who listen to me preach would say that was the problem.
And it's helpful, and it's just releasing, because you know people are hearing you haven't got to be this kind of TV personality
No.
who can just speak off the cuff and be. That's not what we're trying
Man.
to do.
And you remember Ed Miliband, doing that when he did his party leader speech, he memorized the entire thing, but he missed out one paragraph, and it was absolutely vital. And the newspapers just ran for... Ed Miliband completely fluffs his lines. You think you lose one paragraph out of an hour, and that's a professional politician, an expert in it. I just think, man, my memory just isn't... I got a good memory, but it's not good enough to do that without losing stuff. So, no, I need the notes.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. It's really helpful. Really appreciate your time. Just lastly, as we kind of wrap things up, what books or people would you recommend that people either read, or preachers that you recommend people listen to learn, to sharpen themselves?
Yeah, I mean, this is an annoying answer in a way, but who do you admire as a preacher that you think you could say, I could almost see myself being like that? So for me, it's quite easy to go, I was very, very shaped by Piper as a young man, and have been very shaped by Keller more recently, and the two of them I've learned a lot from people from different kind of preaching traditions. I've read a lot of other stuff. But I think in the end, as it probably comes out even in what I've said today, but the more apologetic and structurally, I would line up more with Keller. But in terms of what I think the essence of preaching is and how I want to build to a place of encounter with God in Christ through Scripture, I'd line up with Piper. I've just been very influenced by both of them. But that's not to say that everyone should be. I personally think there's a very strong theology of preaching. So for me, Piper's little book, The Supremacy of God in Preaching, is still the best book I've read on what preaching is. And it's that wonderful quote, is it Henry Martin or Henry Scougal? But or Cotton Mather, I'd go and remember. One of those kind of 18th century and 17th century people that Piper often quote, American guys. They said, the chief office and design of a Christian preacher is to restore the throne of God in the hearts of men, or something like that. And I've always thought, yeah, that's what I'm here to do. And I think for me, if I could just recommend one book on preaching, it would be that, because I think it tells you what preaching is better than anything else. Of course, you read Keller on preaching, outstanding. I read Lloyd Jones, thought, bit overrated. Personally, I just thought, I don't want to wear a black gown. I don't know why anyone would. There's lots of good stuff in it, but I don't listen to the doctor and think, I want to preach like that. So actually, his methods don't help me. Whereas I listen to Keller and I think, oh man, if I could get that amount of cultural engagement into my message and apologetic equipping, I'd be doing really well. So I tend to listen to him more because I want to preach like that. And you need to find who works for you.
That's really helpful. And that'll be the quote people take home. Lloyd Jones, overrated. By Andrew Wilson.
I'm so glad.
For your time and for your wisdom. I'm sure you've served and helped so many people.